Well, hi everyone. My name's Simon. I'm from the Loki project, soon to be called the Oxen project, and we develop a secure messaging app called Session. And today I'm presenting a little session on encrypted messaging and some of the ins and outs and important considerations that we need to make when we're having private conversations online, which is almost every day. I think there's a lot of messaging apps out there. If you have a telephone, you almost certainly have at least one type of messaging app on your phone. It'd be kind of pointless if you didn't, because that's what we use phones for these days. We also have a bunch of new encrypted messaging apps that have been showing up in the last few years. WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, a bunch of others. And they've sort of started to change the conversation about what it means to be private online. But we're going to talk a little bit today about where they came from and what makes them important. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing as well to give you some insight there. So yeah, thanks for coming down to the session, and I hope you get something out of today. If you got any questions or anything like that, feel free to just drop them in the chat. And at the end, we'll have a little back and forth, have a little conversation. Should be pretty good. So yeah, we'll get started. So I guess one of the first key questions we got to ask ourselves is, what do we actually mean when we say privacy? So I guess the key idea being that privacy gives people confidence and safety to say what they really want without fear of worrying about who's watching or any repercussions. The only person that you should need to worry about when you're having a conversation is the other person. Can you trust that particular person with the information that you're giving them? That's how it used to be, and now the internet has come in the last 20 years. We're in this very strange situation where we actually have governments all of a sudden being able to see and hear almost everything that everyone says if they really want to, and that's quite a paradigm shift that's never been the case in human history before. So we should be able to have these conversations in the way that we used to, which is you have to sit down in a room with someone and you can be pretty certain that that's it. It's just that you and that person, and then the trust model is all about them rather than nebulous people out there in the world or whatever. So privacy, what that really means is choosing who you want to reveal information to rather than being forced to through any particular service or app that you're using on a day-to-day basis. So further to this point, privacy is not something that we require all the time, apparently. This is what most people would have you believe. But in fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. Unless we're actively broadcasting information out on the internet, oftentimes we do actually mean for conversations to be private when we say we're having a direct messaging or whatever. And this goes from everything. This could be your mother, this could be your doctor, this could be your business partners, and then it gets more and more serious as we go along. Then we're talking about legal issues, talking with lawyers and whatever else, and we're talking about politics. There's a lot of security that's required there. We're talking about activists as well, people that are standing up for democratic values, often find themselves in a position of compromised privacy and increased surveillance in countries where democratic ideas aren't super well respected by the government of that place. And it's often the case that they go out of their way to ensure that they have more information about those activists in those places, especially in places like China, where essentially the whole internet infrastructure is set up primarily as a surveillance tool rather than primarily as an information gateway, which is super weird. But this is the world we live in. This is 2020, and there are many different types of threats out there. Some of them are internal, some of them are external, but overall we can say that there's lots to consider here, and it's not just when we have those really serious conversations either. A lot of the conversations we have are sensitive in some way, and it's important for us to be able to feel secure in the way that we're communicating with other people. So what this actually looks like when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, who are the people that are actually looking at your stuff and how are they looking at it? These are really good questions. And often it starts with your internet service provider. So, when you connect to Wi-Fi or whatever, that's oftentimes it's run through it's always run through an internet service provider. You'll have to forgive me if I fumble my words. It's currently 5:08 in the morning, so I'm a little bit slow today, but that's okay. So internet service providers in pretty much every country on the planet, bar a few, are forced to store records of every internet connection you make, whether that's on your mobile device or on Wi-Fi, 4G, 3G, whatever it is. Generally speaking, the government has records of every internet connection that everyone's ever made. And in some places, there are some regulations that restrict the government's access to that information. Some places, it's open slather. They can just do whatever they want. And often it's somewhere in between. And this is not good for privacy for a large number of reasons. Obviously, if your internet connections are being logged, which they are all the time, people can work out what you're using, what sites you're connecting to, potentially, depending on the technology we're talking about, who specifically you're speaking with as well. This is all possible and is done very, very frequently. But on top of that, and probably more relevantly, there's a whole bunch of service providers out there that we use on a day-to-day basis. This is your Googles, your Facebooks, your Twitters, all of those companies that are constantly tracking how you're using their application in almost every way. In particular, Facebook is exceptional at this, at figuring out what their users are doing. But that is hugely problematic. You shouldn't. The software, if you're using something to have a secure conversation, that software should not be able to construct a complete social graph of your entire social network. It should not be able to know exactly what you're saying to exactly who and exactly when, but it does. And most people just accept this as part and parcel of what it takes. But even some messaging apps out there that are considered secure do similar sorts of things, and it's kind of crazy. All of this builds up to a huge amount of information about you and your entire life, and that opens the door on your conversations to a whole bunch of people that you might not realize are listening or watching, and that can have some potentially serious consequences, if not now, then down the line possibly as well. So to have privacy on the internet, we need to talk about security. Security and privacy is sort of two sides of the same coin. Well, they're sort of the same coin. They're almost one and the same. You can't be private without having some semblance of security, and vice versa. So, good security means that we can hide in plain sight. We can operate in an environment and feel pretty secure about what we're doing. It leaves the idea of security, if it's done correctly, means that the government may not be able to figure out exactly who you're talking to or what you're doing, and that's advantageous for a number of reasons, but also the service providers themselves, so your Twitters and your Facebooks and so on. But security is a little more complex than that. But we'll talk about some of the strategies that you can use to achieve this property of security and privacy. Number one is encryption. And now, if you look at WhatsApp and Telegram and so forth, they all have some type of encryption. And in fact, pretty much all web traffic these days has encryption. So when you go to a browser now and you type in a website, you're using HTTPS, which is a protocol which allows you to establish a secure channel with the server directly. So when I connect so I'm in Australia today, and when I connect to this server, which may be in, I don't know, I have no idea, but let's just say it's in Germany, we're using HTTPS. I can ensure that my web traffic is encrypted so that it's completely unreadable, the contents of this conversation that we're having now, to everyone until it reaches the server. So that I can be sure of. What I can't be sure of is what the server is doing with that information and how it's distributing it to you. And so there's still security considerations there. But encryption as a tool is incredibly powerful and something that the internet literally would not function without it. It is literally crucial to the entire world's communication network's existence. Without it, it wouldn't exist. So it's incredibly important. And in secure messaging, we can actually go a few steps beyond this and talk about end-to-end encryption. But we can get to that in a little bit. Another method of improving security and privacy, we've got onion routing written on the slide here, but really this could be any sort of tunneling technology that allows you to establish an internet connection where the internet service provider you're using or the jurisdiction you're in ultimately it uses that encrypted tunnel that I was talking about before with HTTPS to reach a server, which then makes requests on your behalf. The difference being with, you've probably heard of a VPN before, you've probably used a VPN before. The difference with a VPN and an onion routing network is that in a VPN, you just have that single server and you generally pay that server and it knows what you're doing. It knows every request you're making. So you have to trust that VPN provider, which can be quite difficult, especially if it's a free service. Never ever use a free VPN. That's some free advice for you right there. The other side of it being onion routing, and in onion routing, instead of just building one tunnel, we actually build 4 tunnels using layers of encryption. That's why it's called onion routing. And what it means is if I pick 3 servers and I bounce my connection through those 3 servers and I encrypt the packets in such a way that they can't work out the full state of the path that I'm using, I can actually create an internet connection where the person that ultimately makes a request has no idea who I am. The server through which I make the first request has no idea where my connection's going. So no one can actually build a full picture of my connection over the internet. And that's an incredibly powerful privacy tool. So it's a really fantastic thing. Onion routing or VPNs in general are a huge addition to privacy and security when it comes to metadata collection and that sort of thing, which is great. Another thing we can look at is decentralization. So a large number of the problems that we are talking about have got to do with trusting a certain party. So trusting Facebooks, trusting the Googles, trusting a VPN company or something like that. And the reason why decentralization is so powerful is because it cuts those people out. If what we're running on our devices is technology that can speak with one another without requiring a trusted intermediary, we can cut out a lot of the problems and a lot of the threats associated with many of the apps and services that we've been talking about today. So these are just a few pieces of the puzzle, but let's now talk about some popular messaging apps and go through those. So just hide my face. So some of the most popular messages out there would be, your Facebooks and your SMS, I guess you would count as well. But some of the more popular secure messaging apps, or they're called secure anyway, and they are quite secure in many ways. They offer some combination of they're end-to-end encrypted, they're open source, security audited, something like that. Some of them have some pretty serious downsides. All of these apps require a phone number to sign up. Telegram's the only one that allows you to hide that in the background. They're all centralized services, so there's always an element of trust involved, although, it gets quite complex with Signal. But in any case, they are centralized services that aren't always what you might think they are. Some of them aren't end-to-end encrypted, and none of them do any sort of protection to secure your phone against people monitoring your internet connections. So there's no onion routing or anything like that. So WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted, but it's entirely closed source. Facebook owns it. They're going to do advertising through it. They know who is talking to who on WhatsApp, and they do collect that information, absolutely. So I would not recommend WhatsApp that highly to people looking for a private messenger, although many people do use it that way. And it's better than nothing, but there is still a massive trust element that has to be placed there. So it wouldn't be my first choice. Telegram, lots and lots of people have been using Telegram. Lots of activists have been using Telegram. And I love Telegram personally, but it really isn't that great from a privacy standpoint. They have servers out there that have unencrypted message history of pretty much all its users that stay active. So there is a huge risk that at some stage, a lot of that message history will get revealed. And if that happens, there could be some very, very serious consequences for people that have been using the app, particularly in the activism space. So I'm wary of Telegram. I think they've got their heart in the right place, but there are a lot of potential risks associated with using it as an actual secure private messaging app. You can do encrypted messaging on Telegram, but it's built in such a way that it's just not that useful. So it wouldn't be my first choice for actually private messenger either, although I do use it on a regular basis in all honesty. Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messaging app, and it is open source and it is security audited. So from that perspective, it's ticking a lot more of the boxes than the other two. But it does require a phone number, and that's a huge sticking point. You require people to sign up through a phone number. That's one thing. If you require to actually be the mechanism by which you add new people is adding them as a contact in your phone by their phone number, or even searching them up by their phone number, making the phone number the key and central to their identity on the application is a super dangerous thing to do. Yeah, a phone number is any government can track you down through your phone number. As long as they know what it is, they know who you are. Most of the time anyway. But yeah, for most people, that's a real downside, because we're talking about wanting private conversations here. And if the first thing you have to do is give up a number which could reveal your identity, you've kind of failed at that task. So that's not amazing. So yeah, that's a bit of an exploration of some of the most popular secure messaging apps out there. We can now have a look at what we've been working on here at Loki, which is Session. Session ticks a lot of boxes. It ticks more boxes than any other private messaging app that I've come across. It is end-to-end encrypted in the same way that Signal is. It is decentralized in that there are actually no central servers. All of the message history is stored on user devices. It's completely open source. We're just about finishing our security audit at the moment. And it has an anonymous sign-up. We don't use phone numbers. We don't use email addresses. We don't use any of that. Anyone can download Session and start using it immediately. And we, as Session, have absolutely no idea who is using it. But this is how secure messaging apps should be. And I figured the best way to sort of walk you through what this actually looks like, instead of talking about it for 5 minutes and not doing an amazing job, we can actually do a little demonstration. So I've got my friend Alex here, and we've got a phone with Session installed on it. If you want to install Session yourself and give us a go, it takes 2 minutes. You can get it on the App Store, but we'll show it to you now. I'll just turn the camera off so we can move it around a little bit. Okay. Here we go. I got Session here. We got Alex has also got Session open on his device here. And this is a completely fresh install. Okay, so remember that this messaging app is unrouting all of the messages. There are no central servers. You don't need a phone number, and it's all end-to-end encrypted. It's about as good as it gets, and it's quite straightforward, right? So this is how you start off. You create a session ID. It'll generate a new private key for me, and this is from going forward. This is my address. This is like my new email address, but for Session. This is actually a public key for those that are following cryptography. So yeah, I'm going to continue. Pick my display name. My name's Simon. we have some options here in terms of how we receive notifications. I'm going to choose the fast setting. And then, yeah, all I have to do is start a new session. I'll just scan his QR code real quick. Oh, no. We didn't test this beforehand. I think Sam's, this is not my phone, this is Sam's phone. It's running an older version of session. But that's okay, because I have my phone, and I can message Alex using my phone. My apologies. Okay. So same process, scan the QR code, boom, hello, just like that. And now Alex should receive some messages. There we go. Just like that. And no one else on earth, apart from me and Alex, and everyone watching this video, knows that that message was even sent, let alone what was in it. Luckily, I didn't say anything particularly insulting to Alex. Okay. Well, and then, yeah, there's some other things you can do in the app as well. We have group chats and much larger group chats as well. And I think a key area that I wanted to discuss is, okay, so how does this even work? How do you get this thing working? So we have here something called a backup phrase, and essentially this is used to this is a backup phrase. I don't recommend you use this because now everyone's seen it. But essentially, we can use these words here to generate a random number, a really big random number, which we then use to generate another really big random number. And this is all how encryption and cryptography works with asymmetric encryption. This allows us to generate a number, which is actually this number right here is the number that we generated. And if people do some mathematical operations on the data that they're sending, using this number as an input, they can actually make it such that only I can decrypt that information because I have this secure number that is, I have this secure seed or this private key is what it's actually called, that I can use to decrypt information that has been encrypted using my public key. That's just how it works. But for the user, it's quite straightforward. We just starting chats. We can do this pretty easily. We just grab our QR code, or we can copy paste that private key. I scan it, and then that's it. Now we're here. This isn't going to work because we're back to the other phone now. But you see the idea. It's very straightforward, and this is what really good privacy looks like, because what we've tried to do is try to build something that is really simple to use, but achieves the very best in security and privacy. So I don't know. I hope you found that interesting. We'll put the camera back now. That's really funny. We should have updated the phone first. So yeah, okay. So you can check that out if you feel like it. Yeah. Anyway, so technology like Session is only a solution to part of the problem. We need the tools to be able to do this, but we also need a few other things as well. One of the key areas of this is regulation, and a lot of governments out there are really trying to make the big mistake of trying to weaken security and privacy. The reality is that the people that we have to worry the most about are the more sophisticated state actors out there. And by weakening our encryption, by weakening our security, we literally weaken the fabric of the internet. And so having access to these private conversations is not only important for us on a personal level, but it's also a massive national security issue for pretty much every nation state out there. I've got a question in the chat, by the way. Does the desktop version work without the need for the phone to be connected to the internet? So all of session runs over the internet. So you do need an internet connection, but the advantage is it can be any internet connection because of the way the onion routing works. You could do it on, a McDonald's Wi-Fi or whatever, wherever you happen to be. Any sort of internet connection will allow you to establish a session and therefore get on the network. And once you're on the network, you can send messages, and no one will know that you are sending messages. We are looking at ways that we can improve this so that people in countries where the internet isn't as good or is heavily censored still have options that they can still connect to the network and make sure that they can access those secure messaging services, even in very adverse conditions. That's actually quite a hard problem to solve, though, and we're not quite up to that stage in the roadmap where we can really focus on those things. But as yet, session hasn't been blocked in any particular country yet, so you should be able to use it no matter where you are, unless they have a whitelisted internet, which is not that common. So it should be all right for now. Anyway, back to the topic. We have some governments trying to pass anti-encryption laws and that sort of thing. It's a terrible idea, very, very bad idea. Bad for users, bad for journalists and activists, but also bad for the national security as a whole. Weakening security and weakening privacy is a recipe to allow foreign actors to come in and attain information about lots and lots of different things, especially if we're pretending that things are secure, and then we've also built backdoors into them to make them less secure. Those backdoors will be exploited, and the US learnt this the hard way. They actually did do this. They created backdoors which were then discovered and exploited by foreign state actor enemies. So you don't want to do this. It's a terrible idea. Another component of it is education. We have to make sure that people that use the internet know how it, not necessarily how it works, but know what they're doing, and have some idea about what it actually means to be secure and what it means to be private, so that they can make decisions for themselves about what sort of security and privacy they really have, and whether or not they're okay with that. Some people are just going to be okay giving up everything about their lives to Facebook. People should have the choice to do that, but they should do so with an education that allows them to understand what the potential consequences of that are. And I think that's a really huge piece. And then, of course, in order for that education to take place, there does need to be really good information out there. And there is. It's not as widespread as you'd hope, but there is some fantastic material out there that lots of people have been working on over many years to improve the public's access to this sort of technical and non-technical summarization of what it means to be private online. So, I think these are all very important. In any case, that's pretty much all I have for now. But what I would like to do is, if you have any security topics or security questions while I'm here, I spend pretty much all day thinking about these problems and working on them. So if you have any particular questions or ideas, please do throw them in the chat just now, and I should be able to give you some answers about those things. But otherwise, you can come find me and talk to me at any time. I'm available on Twitter. You can email me as well. And the whole Loki Foundation team, the whole session team, would love to chat to you about anything in particular that's got to do with security and privacy. We really do care quite deeply about this issue, and we don't know if enough is being done at the moment. At the start of 2020, at the start of the pandemic, things were looking quite good from that perspective. People really started to care because all of a sudden everything they did was online. I don't think people realized how much they were doing things online already before that, but once we had to do all our work calls online, and people started to realize some of the shortcomings and security vulnerabilities with some common apps that people were using. In particular, Zoom is a good example of There was a moment there where everyone just started freaking out. Like, this thing is secure. What can I use? And there just really wasn't many options out there, particularly in video conferencing. It's extremely limited options. So, I think this is a super important topic, and it's not going away anytime soon. And the pandemic really sort of demonstrated some of the challenges with security, but I don't really think anything's really been resolved. So we need to keep fighting and keep moving towards a situation where everyone is more educated and has access to better software that they can use to improve their privacy, as different nation states have different ideas about how they're going to use the internet to their advantage. Some of them are using it to increase productivity, allow greater access to information, all of the really positive things, and some of them are using it for that, but also as a surveillance tool. And those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Oftentimes, it's somewhere in the middle, and pretty much every government in the world has some sort of surveillance program on the internet, and it's using apps like Session, like Signal, that can help us gain back some control and some certainty around what we're actually using. So it's really important to us. I'd love to speak to you about it. If you have any questions at all, please drop them in the chat. Or if you can also, it would be good to have a conversation. If you're here in the chat, tell me what secure messaging app or messaging apps do you use the most, for instance, and we can briefly analyze those if you like. Otherwise, I don't really have much else at the moment. I can leave my email in the chat, and if you have any further follow-up questions, we can get into them. So I'll do that now. Okay, well, if there's nothing further, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you today. My name's Simon from the Loki Foundation, the makers of Session. You can go check it out at getsession.org. I hope you found this little session interesting, and I hope you found out something else you didn't know about secure messaging apps. And it's been fun. So I'll catch you next time, and have a good one.